exact same thing. Non-elected person.
Okay, the meeting of the Board of Ellis County Commissioners will now come to order. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Donna, if you could call the roll.
Commissioner Dean Hazelhorst.
Present.
Commission Chair Butch Schleier.
Present.
Commission Dustin Loft.
Present.
You have a quorum present.
Okay. We had the prior minutes from the 18th and 26th. Any changes, corrections?
I got a chance to look at them just a minute ago. Everything looked fine.
Okay, then the minutes will stand as submitted. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda, A through G.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda items A through G.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0. Any introduction of new employees? Doesn't look like it, all familiar faces. Okay, the first item up is the Cdbg CV public hearing. Lyle.
Good evening, Lyle Pantel, Assistant Director of Fire and Emergency Management. Continuing to work on our Cdbg CV grant funding. As per the stipulations for the grant, we need to have a public hearing. This is an opportunity for any citizens or businesses to ask questions regarding Cdbg funding, the application process, and anything thereto.
Okay, so we need a motion for a public hearing. Okay.
Lyle, I got a couple questions. One, have you considered who's going to administer this grant when and if it's accepted?
Yes, I've been told that it is not hard work to administer, just a lot of work. It's something that I'm willing to undertake to assist the
Okay.
community if I can, and plus it'll help keep costs down.
Okay. I will tell the other commissioners, I had a discussion with Doug Williams about the grant, and he had a discussion with the Northwest Business Planning and Development Corporation to ask if that'd be a possibility for them to come through with all the money that we have, given to that organization over the years, as possibly a olive branch towards Ellis County and potentially getting back into that organization. They were uninterested, which I think is important for you guys to know. They were uninterested in helping Ellis County out, even though we have put that much money over all these years into their organization. So, but I will tell you, Lyle, I will work with you. I work quite a bit with Bank of Hayes as an SBA lender, and they have an organization that they suggested might be possible to do it too.
Okay.
So if it were out of the scope of the realm of what you wanted to do, it's possible that we would have another option for administering it for their small finance fee of it. I'd imagine is how it would work. So
Okay.
but I appreciate you doing the groundwork on this for us.
Okay. Do you want to make the motion?
Yep. I make the motion to move into the required Cdbg-CV public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0. Okay. Anything else you need to add?
I don't believe so.
Anyone from the gallery want to add something about this grant? Okay.
Thank you, Lyle.
Okay, I guess
Thank you.
we will adjourn the public session.
Mr. Chair, we might have skipped over issues from persons not on the order of business. I don't know that there is any, but
Oh,
I think we jumped over that at
I
the,
don't think I had it on my deal.
oh, yeah.
We can go back. Are there any issues from persons not on the order of business? I seem to have missed that.
Good, okay.
Okay. The next is the High Plains Mental Health Annual Report. Whitney and Kaylee. And Walt.
I told them I would let them off the hook today.
Okay.
Walt Hill, I'm the Executive Director of High Plains Mental Health Center in Hayes. With me this evening is Kaylee Connor and Whitney Motor, who both work for me, and Tom Dries, who is our alternate board member. We also have our voting board member with us this evening, but we won't recognize that for conflict of interest. High Plains is established through an interlocal agreement of the 20 counties in northwest Kansas. It's been in existence for many years through that interlocal agreement, and High Plains serves as your community mental health center in lieu of needing to have a public mental health department or some other provision for, say, contracting for mental health services. It's been a good relationship in that we find economies of scale through coordination of service, having centralized administrative functions, computerized system recruitment, and believe we bring a fair amount of value to the counties. Part of that agreement calls for us to provide an annual report to you. I believe your packet has a summary of our services for last year across the 20 counties and some detail on our finances. We have seen some restoration of our state funding after many years of having cuts. However, we have now begun to see insurance companies and self-pay patients struggling a bit more to pay for us. Insurance companies are tightening down quite a bit on reimbursement, delays, authorizations, and that sort of thing. So finally, the state is back to where they promised in 1990 to fund community mental health. All along, counties have maintained the commitment very strong to fund mental health across all of the counties in Kansas. Here in Ellis County, last year, 2019, we served 2,105 patients. That's about the same that we served in 2018. We delivered $4.3 million in services to those 2,000 patients. I won't go into a lot of detail, but that represents about a third of the total patients that we see across the 20 counties. Next week, I'll talk a little bit more about the comparison of some of the metrics for Ellis County and other counties in terms of payroll and numbers served. But suffice it to say, that's generally a pretty steady. About a third of the patients that we serve are from Ellis County. I want to visit about 3 challenges that we've had this year. It has been this of recent, the COVID-19 has been a significant challenge for us with continuing to serve individuals, except we did gear up. We invested over $100,000 in equipment for iPads to serve people by Zoom in their homes. And we did a study of that, over 300 of those patients. A third of them preferred to be seen at home and would continue to prefer to be seen at home. About a third said it's okay either way, phone, Zoom, or coming into the office. And only a third said they would absolutely have to be able to come back into the office after the crisis is done. I don't know what that means for the future. In part, that's going to be driven by what the payers will allow, Blue Cross, Medicaid, but it does improve access. So our revenues are down about 50%. Again, that's this year, not last year. our services are down, but that's pretty well the case in most of healthcare, that with COVID-19, the numbers of patients have dropped because people are really primarily coming for crisis services. We have applied for grants, outside funding to help through these situations, and we're going to be fine. It's just been a challenge. But as of today, we have all of our staff back in the office, and we've started to invite patients to reschedule to come in, be seen in person or virtually. Another challenge that affects Ellis County has been the closure of the KVC Inpatient Children's Unit here in Hayes. It's a significant concern for Northwest Kansas. Senator Billinger advanced a bill to make sure that there were those services in Western Kansas. I communicated with him just yesterday that this is still an unresolved issue, and I believe he's going to be visiting Topeka for some other things, and this issue may come up. We have families traveling to Wichita, and my concern is we have families that aren't traveling to Wichita because they just can't make the trip when things are really difficult, when their child needs inpatient hospital psychiatric care. The other issue has just come up, and that is the state hospital in recent weeks reduced their number of psychiatric beds by 18 because of COVID-19 in order to have an area where they could quarantine patients when they went in, which I understand fully. The problem is, by reducing 18 beds, they projected, and then this weekend did reach a point, they would no longer take involuntary patients. That means if a judge orders someone to Larned, they will be placed on a waiting list and have to wait in a hospital emergency room or a jail, and that is not the right place. For the larger concern is this happened in eastern Kansas. Several years ago, beds were taken offline. They're still yet to be restored, and they had a waiting list in eastern Kansas of 25 patients last week to go to the state hospital. So I want to bring this to your attention as it has significant impacts on all of our counties, on law enforcement, on our hospitals. It's beyond our control, but I want you to be aware of it, that it is an issue that has just arisen. And I know Tom Drees is aware of this. I talked to him about it last week, and we've asked a lot of questions. We're yet to get answers from the state, but I can assure you we'll continue to pursue this because it really impacts law enforcement and hospitals. So I'll stop at that point. I've kind of gotten off, but last year has blended into this year's crisis. So glad to answer any questions, stand for any discussion.
Commissioners, any questions?
Walt, I have a couple questions. When they put those beds in at KVC, what was the commitment at that point, and how have they gone away from that commitment? Obviously we're far out here in rural America, and it seems nearly impossible for someone who may have a kid in Cheyenne County to try to get to Wichita for services for these things. And I know that's why Senator Billinger ran his bill. But with everything going on, I imagine it just didn't catch a priority list. What's the possibility of us getting that restored? I know that there are people in favor of it, but I just don't know how we're going to get a vote on it.
I think, first of all, to your question of what was the commitment, Larned State Hospital had children's beds for many, many years. They decided to close those and privatize those. One of the concerns with privatization is you can lose that commitment versus having a governmental infrastructure. The commitment was made that those beds would be here in western Kansas, and that's what Senator Billinger has advocated and echoed, that was the commitment. And there was some work that began prior to COVID-19 hitting with maybe some other entities who might do this work, really got sidetracked. But partly I raise it here to try to revive this again. And I've emailed all of our legislative delegation this weekend about this as an issue in the event this arises during the special session. Because yes, for when you have a child who is suicidal and dangerous, to go from Goodland or Cheyenne County to Wichita, sometimes we have seen parents just say, no, can't do that. And then you have kids wind up in custody of the state. And so, does that address the question you have?
Yeah, that answers the question. I wondered what the commitment was originally, and then possibly some of the problem solving that maybe has been done in the meantime. I think of resources that we have in Ellis County, namely Hayes Med Center.
Yes.
And their ability to help with funding, to be able to get these facilities the way we need them. I believe the way the beds were before, we were kind of grandfathered in with the Hadley Center, and now there's all kinds of different commitments we have to make because they pulled the beds.
Right.
Just to anybody at that state level who's listening, you know, I would say we are willing to make that commitment. I mean, whatever it takes, we would like to take care of the mental health of young people in western Kansas, and you know, so I appreciate you reaching out to the senator, but also with any of the contacts I've had with Hayes Med, they're already in the problem-solving stage
Right.
of this. They just need to be told that it can happen and that they can do it, and the funding will be there.
Right, and that is a major concern, is making sure the funding is there for the state to follow through, to put money where their mouth is on this commitment. So thank you.
Very good. Thanks, Walt.
Dean, any questions?
He kind of answered them as he was going through with the Hayes Med deal and the different things where these kids are actually ending up, so you just kind of answered my question, so thank you.
Yeah, I know when you look at the some of the statistics there with 32% of the clients being under 19 years of age.
Yes.
That's make quite an impact, and we got to sometimes we have to put these children somewhere, and we don't have a place.
Right, absolutely, absolutely.
So are you
We can
saying-
provide services in the community, send people to their home, but at a certain point, what we see is kids reach a level because of depression or bipolar or even worse problems. They just can't stay at home until they can get stabilized.
So are you seeing more of these children then come to Hayes then? Is that what you're kind of seeing? You're starting to see more of your caseload?
You know, my
pick up?
biggest concern is they don't go anywhere because parents just throw up their hands and say, I can't deal with this. Part of our challenge, Dean, is that in the COVID-19, we didn't see a lot of these families because they weren't coming in, and they're typically pretty isolated families. But I'm aware of the interests that are floating about, particularly Hayes Med and KU, and part of the reason I raise it tonight is just to try to get that back on track, that we're very interested and willing to help with that too.
Okay.
I know something you've mentioned at the meeting the other night is for the benefit of my fellow commissioners. You look at recruiting psychiatrists, and they're just one of the hardest positions to try to recruit.
Yes. We have 2 psychiatrists on site who live here in Hayes. They're physicians, have MDs. Psychiatrists are now the 3rd most difficult specialty in medicine to recruit. As people have come to understand that it's okay to get help for mental health, that there are more different kinds of treatments. We have some brand new treatments, including a fast-acting nasal spray for depression called Spravato. There are more and more tools that we have, but it's very difficult to recruit. We do have, we use telemedicine through a company with which we contract called Novotel, and we use telemedicine, but we still need boots on the ground here in town, in addition to the 3 to 4 staff that we contract for with a Novotel that live in other parts of the country. But it's very, very difficult, and that is going to be a challenge going forward.
Absolutely.
Walt, one other question, as is our number one concern, Ellis County. How do the numbers look as far as per capita for Ellis County, and then also taking into account our distance. You know, we're right here to be able to take care of these services. Have you ever ran the numbers based on per capita type of structure?
And the formula that we have does include per capita.
Okay.
Includes population as 1/6 of the formula,
Okay.
utilization as 1/6 of the formula, and then valuation and others. So we try to have a balanced formula that arrives at that benchmark. So that's included in that. Ellis County has about the third highest penetration rate in terms of the population, the third highest utilization, folks coming in, a couple of the other counties do, and also admissions. But the funding benchmark does include the per capita utilization.
Okay. As I say, I was born and grew up for a little while in Cheyenne County, so I could imagine utilizing High Plains Mental Health would be much easier for somebody in Ellis County than Cheyenne.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I wondered about that also. How you guys, I mean, I really appreciate the investment you made to try to get to people's homes to continue to give them psychiatric care. You know, I have a big concern with unemployment coming up, and it's tied to depression,
Yes.
And homes falling apart, things like that. You know, I imagine you guys have to be geared up for dealing with that at least through the few months when we know it will spike.
And one of the things, we made an intentional decision, our board made a decision and supported, we did not lay off any staff. Many mental health centers did lay off staff in the midst of this, seeing it coming. We lay off people, we aren't going to get them back in terms of our workforce. And then they aren't going to be available to deal with the depression and substance use that are huge issues out of this. So we're fully geared up where we were before to see patients, and we are at the ready.
Very good. It's good to hear.
Anything else, Dean?
I don't. Thanks, Walt.
Okay, well,
Thank
we
you,
thank
Walt.
you.
Good.
Okay, see you next week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay, our next agenda item is the administrative building camera system. Mike?
Good evening. Mike Leiker, Ellis County IT Director. I come before you tonight as at your request. As you recall, at the May 14th Commission budget meeting, we had a discussion about camera systems, and you had asked that I research and present back to you what options we'd have. So what you have before you is a proposal that includes camera systems. After IT doing a full analysis of this building and evaluating where our camera systems would need to be, I've created a proposal that has several options for you to consider. The first option would be a complete optimal coverage solution that would include cameras for the basement area here where it is not secured, and then the main floor, as well as exterior cameras. As you recall, there were some questions and discussion about exterior camera coverage. As you recall, there's one camera that the treasurer has trained on their drop box out there, but it doesn't cover much of anything else. So the first option would be the complete solution. Within each of those three options, I gave you both the optimal solution as well as a more economical solution, which would be lower resolution cameras. But for a complete solution with the optimal equipment would be roughly $10,506. And then to go with the lower resolution cameras, it'd be about $8,900, $8,966. And then if you wanted to drop, the second solution would be to remove the exterior camera solution. And so for, again, the high resolution optimal cameras, it would be about $6,100. And then if you went with the lower resolution, it'd be about $5,100. And then, of course, the third option would be just the lobby cameras. I actually, I think I got off a little bit there. The third option would be the $5,100 for just the lobby area up there. And of course, with all of those options, the recording software, the NVR software, is included in that. It's roughly $2,000, but that's included in this price. So that is what we came up with as possible solutions for cameras in this building. So I leave that up to you. I don't know where you want to go from here. If you wanted to have complete coverage in this building, including exterior, or just exactly how far you'd want to go, I could certainly get. These were our best estimates with us doing all of the labor on that and purchasing them from our suppliers. So depending on how you'd like me to go with that, we can proceed.
Mike, are the lower resolution cameras still good? Can you see things with them, or is it just not that good?
What happens when you reduce the resolution of the cameras, it makes it harder to make out faces, and that has to do with how far away they are. For most of these, there isn't a huge difference between the high res and the low res. There is one camera in particular throughout all these options, and that would be upstairs on the west entrance. We have a panoramic camera that I would recommend we use the higher resolution, because it is a 360 camera and it would have better coverage in all directions. The other ones, we could still have pretty good coverage with the lower resolution cameras. Down here in the basement, as long as the lights are on, we could make out faces pretty well. So there isn't a significant difference in the quality, but obviously there's some price difference between the two. Of all of them, like I said, the panoramic camera and the exterior cameras, if possible, it would be better to have the higher resolution cameras because it is much further distance. I mean, simply getting it up high enough to have the field of vision, you're getting further away from the subjects. And that's really where, as we discussed last time, law enforcement comes to us often and asks if we have camera coverage. And if they can't make out a license plate or a face, then it's really not very useful to them. So
Right.
There's a few cameras that I would recommend higher resolution, but down here in the basement, probably the lower res cameras would be sufficient for us. And some of the others.
So we could have a mixture.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The cameras, the resolution of the cameras isn't really the challenging part. I mean, we can mix and match as we need to, but it's really just how much coverage throughout the building you'd like to spend money on. So,
Dean, thoughts or comments?
On the outside now, you just have one camera, correct?
just the treasurer's camera in the alley that faces towards their drop box, and it really doesn't see much else. Maybe the garbage dumpster next to it, but there's not a lot. And most traffic, because it's a one-way, you often get the back. I mean, you might see the license plate as they drive away. I've never really looked too closely at it to see what they're getting there, but I know we've had law enforcement come talk to us, and they've looked at that coverage, and it wasn't helpful to them. That is the only camera on the exterior that we have.
And that's the only one that we have now that does recording or anything on the outside of the building?
Doesn't record.
Or doesn't record?
It was recording. It
But it
is
doesn't
not
now.
recording right now.
Oh, okay, okay.
None of the cameras in the treasurer's office are recording.
Oh, okay. No, I guess really, for that 10,506, that's all high-resolution cameras, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. No, go ahead.
Commissioner Roth?
I've got a few things to say. I have a little bit of background with cameras because of my store and the security that we've put in there. But I wanted to start with a question, Mike, that was brought to me, and I think that it's something that I was interested in when it was brought to me is, when the treasurer came and pulled the hard drives, you guys pulled the hard drives for her because she didn't want the things to be recorded on them. Do you have any idea where those are?
I can only assume
Okay.
that they are in the treasurer's office somewhere.
Okay, probably just setting on a shelf or something like that.
Yeah, the treasurer sent one of their staff down, and we loaned them our cart, and we put the 2 NVR units and a switch and some cabling on there, and it left our office, and I don't know where it went from there.
How much value is there in that? You know, that was taxpayer paid for, so, you know, what are they worth?
Well, the units are several years old. One of them is roughly 5 years old, I believe, and the other one is 6 or 7. The first one, the older one, was installed or brought down from the courthouse when we moved down.
Okay.
From my understanding. The second one was purchased a couple years after that, or within 18 months after that, to add to the system for their needs. As far as the value of those units themselves, there's probably not a whole lot of value in them, but replacement value, which I think is maybe what you're asking for,
Yeah.
we're probably looking at in the neighborhood to purchase new ones, hardware, probably in the neighborhood of $10,000. The proposal that I've got in front of you, we are proposing to use our current hardware. I had to buy a new hard drive, which is about $500, but otherwise we would use the hardware we have in our servers in our system right now.
Okay. And so they will be tied into a local server, all of our camera systems.
That's correct.
I will say from my experience on it, and it was a great question about resolution of the camera, you know, I would go towards high-def cameras. It's almost always that we're trying to figure out a face or a license plate or things that are hard or indistinguishable and would be tough even for us to just pick up watching when something happened. It's a lot better when you can go back and get a good still image. You know, these are the things that police officers ask me for when they're trying to see time. They want to know time things happen. They want to see what kind of vehicle, color, and sometimes even my cameras, which I feel are pretty good, it's tough to figure out even what kind of car just zoomed by, you know, so let alone the license plate or things like that. One thing, Mike, that I would like to do, and it might be good for all three of us to do it at some point, is just see where all these cameras might be going, kind of what view of the building we would get, just to make sure we're not overkill on this. I mean, that's mainly why I had this question, is that you look at this big dollar amount, which I think is important to the taxpayers. I think it's important to protection of our employees, and I think is something that, while it looks kind of big at the beginning, the safety aspect of it in the future, the ability to know and understand what's going on in our building, which it is our building, is important. So, you know, I guess we can request the treasurer talk to us about what happened with those hard drives, because I'm interested. But otherwise, I think that's the best way to go forward with this. See what kind of view we're going to get of the building, you know, individually with him. Make sure we concur that that's a good look of what we think is important. I think it'll add security to the whole block. I mean, we own such a big building. The idea that we add a little security for the whole area is helpful too. So, but I would say let's go towards high def, especially with the minimal difference in total cost percentage-wise, just because they're just useless if you can't figure out who a person is. You know, the things that you want to know, you could even, you know, you see it all the time. They put them up on Facebook, and you're like, well, I'm not going to guess. That looks like somebody I know, but I'm not going to guess. And those high-def cameras are the way to go to not have that issue. With high-def, we have quite a bit more storage that we have to do, I believe. What kind of time frame are we going to be able to store information?
As you know, and as said, the higher res you go with it, the more storage you need. Ideally, I would like to store video at the very least for 2 weeks, if not for a month at a time. Now, we could always have some other off-site storage for older. Typically, a month is a pretty good time frame. Most incidents that happen that law enforcement is involved in, it's pretty quick turnaround that they know they want to look for video evidence. And so, if something is a month old, generally it's already been dealt with for the most part. But that's what I would shoot for, would be 2 weeks to a month in retention on those.
The last thing I would say is I'd love to have other department heads and elected officials to weigh in a little bit to us on this. I think some have come out and said they'd love the idea, and I'd like to see what they think is beneficial. I can tell you from my perspective, sometimes it's just remembering a face or things like that I utilize them, but I'd imagine we have people come in, leave, and they're trying to figure out who it was because something was left, they didn't sign things properly, they didn't do things properly. That's what I had hoped our treasurer was utilizing cameras for in the first place, was training staff and making sure that transactions were done properly. I think that would be nice for us if other elected officials and county staff would at least tell us the type of things that we should be pointing at, things they would want to see, as well as the overall security of them. So.
Okay. Do you wish to table this until the last meeting of the month? And
I think
see
so.
what kind of
That'll
input
give
we
us
can
enough
get?
time maybe to discuss it with you.
that'd be good.
And I can certainly go over with you where the camera placement is that we looked at, and give, and as well as at our executive team meeting, we can talk about what's covered. The complete system that I propose to you would cover not only the entrances, both the west and east entrances, but also the lobby area, which would also include, as you know, most cameras only get about 90 to 105 degrees of view, so you need more cameras. But we were also trying to position them so that we could see not only the treasurer's side, but also the clerk and the appraiser's side who comes and goes at least into the area. We didn't look at camera coverage inside the clerk and appraiser's areas, but we could have coverage to see who goes in and out of those areas with this proposal. Now, obviously, if you want to get more granular and see who's in the clerk and appraiser areas and know what's going on, then we'd have to add cameras to that. But we tried to get as good a coverage, at least to see them coming and going.
Right.
And I would certainly welcome sitting down with you guys and showing you what we had in mind.
And Mike, I believe the side alley, that is a controlled entrance, correct?
That is correct.
Okay,
And
so
one
that's
of the-
not as big of a deal.
One of the camera angles that we were looking at would see that from the interior. So
Okay.
we would see all the staff that come in through that entrance as well. So.
Okay. The last thing we'd have to figure out is how to pay for it and how we would want to do that, but.
I didn't have a proposal for that.
Okay, we'll figure that out with Darren if we decide to go that route, but
Sure.
yeah, appreciate the information. I think that would give us enough time to.
I think I'm
see-
in agreement with Commissioner Ross that we should go with the high resolution also.
That'd be my choice.
And
But we
and
put out-
I agree with the month time frame. Usually within a month, if there was a situation that was missed or that, law enforcement or one of the staff needs to go back. The other question is access, and it'll all be through the IT department, I imagine, Mike. Just,
Yes.
we need to know certain time and date, this camera, and you guys would be able to pull that kind of stuff for them.
Yes, and in fact, we could even provide view access to staff. I think of a good example. A couple years ago, we had an altercation or some sort of event outside the treasurer's office, and I believe the panic buttons were pushed, but folks in the clerk's office and appraiser's office didn't really know what was going on. Certainly, those of us downstairs didn't know what was going on, but if certain staff members in other offices would have view access to that, they could see, okay, the law enforcement just showed up, something's going on. So it would be helpful there as well.
I believe our phones go desk to desk as well, so, it might be nice if everybody had some access to them so that you could see where somebody was in the building without having to walk around and find them for some
Absolutely.
efficiency, so.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Okay, the next agenda item is the Northwest Business Corridor Engineering Amendment. Darren?
Darren Myers, Intern County Administrator. I asked Buck Driggs to come this evening. He's the lead engineer for the firm that's doing all the work out there for us at the Northwest Business Corridor. So I think instead of speaking anything that he may want to address with you, I'll just pass it over to him because he's the expert.
Okay.
Good evening, Buck Driggs with Driggs Design Group. Before you tonight is amendment number 1 for the original contract of the Northwest Business Corridor. This amendment involves the right-of-way acquisition component as well as the environmental assessment. These are items that we really didn't know a whole lot about with the original contract. We had to get into design before we understood how many tracts of property were really going to be required. And then we also, at the original scope and fee, we weren't really sure whether KDOT was going to require us to do an environmental assessment of the project or not. And based on feedback we've gotten from them and Federal Highway Association, they're going to make us do that. So this amendment covers those items. There's a total of 31 tracts of ground that we will be either acquiring some type of permanent easement or temporary easement as a part of the construction of the project. To kind of give you a little bit of an update on the project, we have submitted 30% plans to KDOT. They went in here a couple of weeks ago. This is the second submittal that we've had to them as far as the alignment of the road. I think overall we're probably about 3 weeks ahead of schedule. This will keep us ahead of schedule. The environmental review of the project, a lot of it's been done already by KDOT. They've helped us out throughout that process. We have a few of the bigger ones to overcome, but that was part of the 30% plan submittal. So that's going really well. We anticipate starting geotech either late this week or the first part of next week on the project. Terracon will be out there doing some borings to kind of give us an idea of where the rock's at and what kind of fill material we have and so forth. Our next set of plans will be field check plans. We'll submit those, I believe, in mid-August. So.
Okay. Commissioner Hazelhorse, any questions?
Nope, I know they've been busy out there because I've heard lots of people talking you guys are out there, so good job and I'm glad you're moving forward and you've got a lot submitted already, so good deal.
Commissioner Ross, any questions?
Buck, explain to me what this environmental thing is. I mean, is there anybody that we can call to get a reprieve from that? It doesn't seem like an issue out there, but
Not when you got federal dollars. You
Okay.
pretty much have to follow their guidelines.
even a senator?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, it ain't gonna matter. And I mean, honestly, KDOT's helped us out a lot throughout the process. We just have to write the report. So our plans and the project goes in under review by 16 different review agencies. And that's, some of them are tribal, some of them are more of a wildlife and parks type and stream bed stabilization. And there's just a lot of different review agencies. SHPO is one of them. But they all get a chance to comment on the project. We don't anticipate there being any issues, but it's just part of the process. And what we're doing as a part of the process is writing the overall report, creating the purpose and need statement, why this project's important, and then we package it all together. It'll probably be a 100-page document by the time we get everything there, but our page, part of it will probably be about 15 pages. But, and then it'll go in for Federal Highway. I don't think it's going to impact anything. It's just part of the checklist of items that we have to do to get their money and move on with the project.
And the idea is we don't affect wildlife, we don't affect history with the tribal thing,
Yep.
you know, those type of things.
No ancient graveyards out there, or aerial battlegrounds or Indian battlegrounds, or
They might find some old buffalo bullets out there.
I'm hoping they don't find anything.
So out of 31 tracks, what is the smallest tract to the biggest tract?
Diamond would be the biggest tract. That's kind of where the curve's going through the Polifka family farms. They're the biggest tract. I don't know what the acreage is, but then the rest of them, there's some of them that are really small, and some of them are just, you can see on that sheet, there's some of them that are only temporary construction easements. All we needed is to construct, and then we'll turn it back to them. So
Okay.
it varies.
Okay.
Okay. Do I hear a motion?
I'll move to approve the attached amendment to the Driggs Design Group Engineering and Agreement in the amount of $119.775.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
I have none, Chair.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes 3-0.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, our next agenda item is the 2021 budget review. Darren?
As the commissioner requested, we have this back on the agenda tonight to follow up on a couple items from a couple weeks ago in May. I guess it's June already. Together with all the comments from the May 14th and 15th meeting, as well as the meeting following that, the proposed budget that is in your packet includes all of the changes that the commission had requested, minus the one unresolved issue about how the commission felt or wanted to make the decision of tonight as to the position in the treasurer's office and the position in the appraiser's office. If you wanted to swap those out for 2021, but other than that, every other option or correction that the commission wanted to make has been made. And just for a couple clarification purposes, because there's a couple individual questions from the commission, this budget does include the reduction from oil and gas by 50%. It does include the yet to be approved raises for 2020, which would impact the 2021 budget. And the mill levy rate increase is included in that. And the sales tax revenue for the healthcare tax is in there in 3 different places. One for EMS, one for health department, and one for the subsidies for High Plains Mental Health to help bring their funding level back up. And there is another short entry or a small entry in there in the general sales tax portion transfer into the general fund for the for the Department 97, also for subsidies as well, for I believe it was about $32,000. The remaining of that $650,000 estimated dollars for the general sales tax is all going to be into a different fund if the commission continues to want to move forward with a bond. Now, if that changes, I did talk to our financial consultants today. The rates are continuing to lower on a downhill trend, which is good if the commission still wishes to move on a bond. However, if that does change within the next couple months and you don't want to do the larger amount or only do half and such, we could use that, whatever difference is that the commission would like to choose, just put that into the general fund and have that as basically additional revenue, which would roll over and help it make it more of a budget surplus. Rather, we are at a budget surplus right now, which is good, by about $40,000-$50,000 in the black, but that would just increase to that unless there were any other changes or expenditures that the commission would like to add into the budget, which I've not collected in the past. So with that, I guess I'll just open it up to see if you have any other issues for me.
Questions or comments, fellow commissioners?
I'm just going through a couple of things here, so if Darren or if Destin wants to go ahead, that's fine. I didn't know he changed a couple of these numbers, but that's fine.
Okay, I think in the second round of, budget discussions, I think we need to have another discussion with the appraiser and with the treasurer, if the treasurer would like to, and or at least some sort of formal understanding of her employment in there and the need for it. That's been my struggle and contention with this is we have an appraiser's office that's always behind schedule. We have a treasurer's office who constantly talks about how ahead of schedule they are. I would just like both of them to talk about where they think they would be if we were to fund that position, back and forth. One question I do have, how much revenue does the mill levy increase create?
Couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but it's roughly about one mill is about between 400 to 410,000 based off last year's revenues. Now, once the appraiser's office recertifies this year, that may go up a little bit, but a good estimate right now is about 400,000 per mill.
But what about our cap mill rate?
The cap would be 1.8, so that's not per mill. That's over what the total collection was last year.
Right.
I can tell you that here in just
Usually
a
in the
second.
250, 280,000 range, I believe.
Around 250, 240, that's what I was trying to go back and find. Actually, Dustin, when you asked it, I'm trying to find that here. I thought it was like 240,000.
roughly $264,500.
264, okay.
And the 50% decrease in oil and gas accounted for 800,000-ish?
50% was roughly $560,000.
A million in total.
Okay.
It is something that I would be willing to visit with the commission about as well. Oh, I know we looked at it several times, that if we didn't touch that mill levy and such, well, how would it impact us in the future? And even with all the changes, it puts us back to that point where we're not putting any money back into reserves again as well. After, not as bad as we were before the sales tax, but in a couple years, it catches back up to us again.
I just got a message that the governor vetoed the property tax banking bills.
Yeah, she vetoed about 3 or 4 bills today and approved about 5 or 6 of them. If you have any interest, I can show you.
Of that financial impact. As has always been our contention and our problem, my issue is right now in the middle of a global pandemic, I would like us to look at these numbers, especially the 50% decrease from oil and gas, the mill levy increase. I would like to sustain the mill levy the way it is now. But I imagine if we needed to, we could find some common ground there, as well as this includes pay raises to get to this point. I can tell you that most government agencies right now are not giving pay raises at all. In fact, frankly, I think Ellis County should thank the voting public right now, because without them passing the sales tax, we would be furloughing employees like crazy.
No question.
So that's something I think we should consider, where these monies come from for next budget year. My proposal would be to maintain the mill levy as it is. Whether or not that includes an increase in the tax base, I think it would slightly because of the increase in property value.
Well, we don't know yet for sure until those get certified from the appraiser's office. So
once those are certified, I'd like
have
to
been submitted,
discuss
I
that.
believe this week,
Yeah. That's,
tomorrow.
Tomorrow, okay.
So
So
we
maybe
won't know
by
for a
next
couple
week, we'll
weeks.
be able to have some more, paying down numbers on that. I just feel like in especially tough times in the oil field, tough times in farming, I think that there should be a discussion about at least freezing our mill levy rates, whether that means an increase in revenue or not for us. As I said, I feel like we're lucky. Also, this budget does include that bond. What kind of bond were you budgeting for here, Darren? Because that's obviously something we haven't decided on.
Basically using,
Is it that
I'd have to
max
look at
5
the-
million, 10-year?
I saved out about 10% of that and roughly made it's about a $590,000 annual payment for it, which only left about $50,000 remaining of the estimated sales tax previous estimates.
Okay.
So, that's a big swing there. I mean, oil is going to come back up, which that money which will rebound. We just don't know when. And then by having also if you don't do a bond for another year, that's another $600,000 that you could put in there.
Yeah. Yeah, so you were factoring a $560,000 payment on a bond-ish?
And that was just from previous estimates and talking to the appraiser's office, just a guess at what I could put in there just to help us prepare and look at to see where we're at. And we just went with 50%.
Okay, and that was going to be, if it were around a $5 million bond, it was a 10-year bond for $5 million and around a 5-year for $2 million.
I think it was a 10-year bond, and I think the annual payment was about $597,000.
Okay.
Which left us about that other remaining $53,000 for fluctuation in sales tax years, which those are also underestimated from what the Kansas Department of Revenue was thinking that we could get. But I did get some emails from the state today. The May tax collections weren't, this doesn't impact us yet, but statewide, the sales tax were only half of what they expected, or they expected to have like I think about a 15% reduction, and it was only about a 7% reduction. So I'd have to pull it up. it wasn't as bad as what they thought they were expecting it to be anyway. So that's good news. However, that's the month of May, which is when everything started hitting in and setting in a little bit harder.
It was also when the federal government injected $4 trillion into the economy. So we could just be lucky for a month, you know.
Next month's reports could be worse off.
I will say I had a surprising May month, but I do not expect to continue to have surprising months through the summer of 2020. You know, definitely a lot of unknowns. The other thing that I think would be nice is from Road and Bridge, if we started panning down some of the projects we really wanted to do, really start getting an idea of cost on it before we pull out a bond. That's $5 million. I want to know these numbers at least within 10%. And I know that Bill's been working on that, so you know, I think maybe by within the next few weeks, I'd really like to know where we're at on that. And then, yeah, as far as I'm concerned with you, commissioners, if we catch a low day in the bond market, I don't mind running up here to approve a bond. But I do not want to take a $5 million bond if we only deem that we need $2.3 million to do the projects we want to do. So no reason to spend Ellis County's money until we know exactly what we think should be done as elected officials. So that's, as Bill will always say, more money is going to get better roads, but at some point we reach a level that we have to pull back. Bill's a perfectionist, so Bill will fix every road he can with every money that we give them, but we have to make an ultimate decision, and so I really want that stuff panned down before we made our final decision. But I'd like to hear what you guys have to say on that. I just can't imagine increasing people's property taxes this coming year.
Given the situation, it's only right. Is the board in favor of removing that 1.6% increase for employees?
Well, and the mill levy, I guess, too, Butch. That's why I was just refiguring it here as Dustin was talking, so thank you. That mill levy increase, I guess I want to see it go away also. I mean, and for now, we can talk about it again next year, but
Sure.
I think for now, I think it needs to be removed.
And I don't know what money is made up from not removing the 1.6 for increases. We have given the increases to a number of staff that we deem were being underpaid for their level and position. However, if we remove that, we remove the mill levy increase, the revenue increase, I'd like to see where we stand. I know we're talking 260,000 versus 120,000, so there's money there, but also at some point we can talk about a bond payment, and that bond payment could be less. I fully feel like we should run a balanced budget, and I'm glad that we're a revenue positive budget the way we are now. But if that revenue positive budget is from a tax increase, I'm not in favor of it at this point in this economy.
Yep, I'm not either. I can't support that either. There's too many people unemployed in Ellis County, and how do you throw a mill levy increase at them now and say, hey, no, I can't support that either.
Yeah,
So do
frankly.
we want Darren to bring in those new numbers next week?
Please, if
Okay.
you're in favor of that, Chair.
I'm in favor of that as well.
And then also with the position on here, we've already known that the appraiser has demonstrated they need more staff. We know that. We don't know if the treasurer needs that staff person or not, although the treasurer worked a number of months without that position and never increased overtime. If we move that position over to the appraiser, we could see how that goes in 2021. We might have to reassess that for the 2022 budget about giving the treasurer some staff back. But I think the prudent thing to do is to try to get the appraiser so she's got a workable office. And we're not going to hire an appraiser, staff for the appraiser, and still retain that staff person for the treasurer. So we do have to make up our mind with this thing.
Yep, nope, that's fine.
Yeah, I think that's the hard decision for me. I think, Darren, do we have a scheduled time that we would do our second round? sometimes we kind of overdo these things. They just come back and ask the same questions, same answers. Even if it were just a written response from the treasurer and from the appraiser of the need, the overtime hours, I hope that everybody understands that's the number one thing we're looking at. If you're down positions, we don't want to pay a bunch of overtime, but if you're down a position and you don't use overtime, then we wonder if that position is really needed. That being said, the treasurer does make money, and I would hate to see a loss of income if we were to remove a position that is maybe keeping an eye on that type of investment. And I, deem both departments incredibly important. The other thing that comes to mind for me, and this is from a private sector CEO mentality, is that I would hate to punish one department who's having success and reward another department who's behind all the time, unless it really is deemed that we just have an issue with staffing in one department. Then it's a pretty easy CEO decision. We need more people here, less people here. It's great that they're being as efficient as they are in this department, but we've got to figure out a way to get more efficient in another department. And sometimes that's staff, sometimes that's leadership. But I'm not going to be able to make that assertion until I can get something from both of them that explains their staffing levels, things like that. I also know that new employees are not the type of employee, you sometimes don't want to train them during a tough time. However, if you can go through that tough time and not use overtime, then you wonder if that position was needed at all. Those are some really good questions. I think those are the two things that we really have to dive into over the summer while we finish up the budget and decide which way we want to go. And maybe it's that we don't approve either of the positions, and we work on other ways with the treasurer to help figure out a way to get caught up on things. So, or with the appraiser, I'm sorry.
And perhaps, Darren, you could check with some comparable counties to see how much staffing levels is in the appraiser or treasurer's office and some comparables.
Yeah, that would be highly beneficial.
I think it would be.
And looking through some of the capital stuff, I still have a few questions that I think I'll run past Darren first. But as we get into that, I think we'd also need to really discuss capital improvement, the capital budgets, and stuff like that too. So.
Okay, so next week we'll be looking at an update on the numbers, and then also we'll be doing the outside agencies requests next week.
Correct. I've gotten most of all but about maybe 2 or 3 out of the 14. So due date was today, so I expect to have, well, I'm looking at my inbox now, there's not there, but hopefully by tomorrow or the next day have those. And I will do my best, because that's a little bit of a significant rework of the budget to make some of those changes. So
Okay.
that's a couple hundred line items that'll have to be changed for that. But I will do my best between now and the end of the week to make that happen. So you have, but I want to clarify, you want to take all the proposed pay raises out for next year.
Yes.
Well, the proposed pay raises for this year
This year.
Yeah.
for out of next year. Take out the property tax increase, which was at roughly $265,000. And then those were the two big changes out of the numbers wise. A couple other things that you want to see is, and I believe Bill was still planning on working on it by next week, to have a list of those 10 projects and what their estimated prices were, so we can look at that. You want letters, if either the appraiser or the treasurer cannot be here, a letter to justify
However
either
they
the
would like.
need or
However they want to present it.
the need of their
If they
positions.
could communicate through us and not the press or media, that would be nice. I think that would be cordial to our position as commissioners, if they could go ahead and just send us an email as opposed to letters to the editor. That would be nice as well.
Okay, I will make sure that they communicate that with you, and if I can get them, we can put them in the anything extra into the budget afterwards, based on your commission's decision. And then the final thing that you wanted was a update of what other treasuries have in their as for staff in their office.
Yeah.
Is there anything
As
else
well
I
as
missed?
appraisers.
As well as appraisers, yeah.
Anything else that I missed?
The only other thing, Darren, I think is worthy of noting is that our budget shows zero decrease in the services that we offer. It seems like all these savings are typically coming from our health insurance savings, and so I want to make sure that when should we have some numbers on health insurance savings? That was always the scary thing, is when you budget for these savings, are they really going to be there? And so I know that that's where a lot of the savings came from, that, and we have some retirees that have been around for quite a while. But yeah, how does that pan out for us?
So we're getting into that crunch time for the budget. You know, everything's coming in. Basically, we have about just over a month to get everything finalized. We're going to have the outside agencies next week. I've asked by the end of the month to have estimates for health insurance. However, we won't truly know what those numbers are. As we sit now with the state plan, those numbers weren't released until the October timeframe. So you have to basically budget for what usually the 9% annual increase was. Hopefully this year we'll be able to be a little closer if we step away from that.
Okay.
I'm hoping by a meeting in July that we can have something more definite on that. And other than that, I mean, we're back, like I say, at those final plans where the final budget needs to be approved within a month, so that way at the first meeting in August, we can have that certified, approved to the clerk for publication and approval. So we're only 2 months away from having the process complete, but there's, like you say, there's some critical points left to fix and correct as the commission chooses.
Great. Well, and as soon as we figure out approximately where we need to be on a bond, I think that I will keep my cell phone on me, and if Ranson tells us that we think we caught a dip in the market, I'm happy to run in here if you guys are to approve a bond. What's our limitations with COMA as far as allowing the press and everybody to know if we were to do that?
Oh, it's 2 days?
2 days. So yeah, I guess we would have to ask them if they think they can catch that at any point and give our notification to the press.
If you remember, that's a little bit of a process too. They'd have to come out here and publish the intent for go to bonding, and it's about a 2-month process. So
Okay.
I don't think that specific question was asked, that if we signed it today, if that is the rate we would get 2 months when they actually sell. I think they'll actually vary. So, you know, we're on a downhill trend. How long is that trend going to continue before it starts to come back up? So I don't know if they'll fully say what you'll have 2 months from now.
Very good. Well, we'll just keep in contact with them and see when they suggest as our financial advisor to get involved in that. But I truly do really want to know approximately what we're going to do with this bond before we start putting it out.
Oh, definitely. And Bill will have that for us so we can prioritize projects, and
Perfect.
that'll be no problem.
Okay. County Administrator report, Darren.
One thing I have tonight is an update just for the emergency management side of things. As the commission was aware, on May 18th, we had to enter a disaster declaration, so that way, just in case future things came up throughout the state with COVID-19, whether to request more supplies and such, we had to sign that document. Since then, the process has changed. Imagine that. But now they need all 3 commissioners to sign the document. And now that they are allowing it to not only last 7 days, but indefinite until the commission decides to revoke the disaster, which is the way it used to be, or how it was in the state until the new disaster declaration came in and all the legislation that happened at the state level. But I do have the declaration. I do have a request into the state for more supplies. Without the declaration, we cannot request or receive supplies. It may eliminate us from funding. It may eliminate us from support. We have besides the Cdbg -CV grant.
Yeah.
We also have a public assistance grant that we're working on to help with different funds. HaysMed is also in working with us on that to help get some of their costs as well as in the courts. So I know that there's some thoughts behind why we have a disaster, but this kind of it's not really stating that we have a local disaster. It's the resources that it allows us to procure through the process. So I would ask that the commission sign this new proclamation for a local disaster tonight, and it will be in place until I bring it back forth to the commission to revoke it, which could be 2 months, it could be 6 months, but it's kind of where we're at. That way we don't have to do it every week.
I think we should do that.
Yeah, I have no
We'll
problem
sign
with that. No problem.
Okay,
I will have the commission sign that before the evening then.
yes. County Commission reports. Commissioner Hazelhorse.
Mr. Chair, I have nothing.
Okay. Commissioner Ross.
Just a personal note from me, I spent most of the morning at Hayes Med Center in the emergency room with my little guy who went up a slide and hit his eye and had to get some stitches. So thank you for their staff. I don't have a fever and I wore a mask the whole time I was in there, but really appreciate having that organization do as good a job as they do. It's not easy to work on little guys that are rambunctious anyway, and so they did a wonderful job with him, and so I just wanted to say that before we went to executive session. That's
Okay.
it from me.
And I have no report, and I think we have 2 executive sessions.
Mr. Chair, I move the Board of County Commissioners recess into executive session under the following exemption to the Kansas Open Meetings Act pursuant to the non-elected personnel matter exemption. Subject to be discussed during executive session is personnel matter, 15 minutes. And those persons attending in addition to the Board of County Commissioners are Mr. Bill Jeter, Mr. Darren Myers, and Mr. Tom Drees.
I second that.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. There's no action.
I move that the Board of County Commissioners recess into executive session under the following exemption to the Kansas Open Meetings Act pursuant to a non-elected personnel matter. Subject to be discussed during the executive session is
For the,
county administrator position. Will last 15 minutes. Those in persons, Board of County Commissioners, and Mr. Bill Jeter.
I'll second that motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes.
Dean, do you care if I look at those and copy them?
They're yours.
Okay, there's no action, and the meeting will adjourn at 6:49.
Thank you, gentlemen. Always a pleasure.
See which one this is?